the choices that are available to you to take action on any given day, and find the one that.
All right, let me get my stuff together here. Y'all, we're just technologying in our worlds. Let's see. This should be the right thing. Ah, great, it is. Hold on, I hear a dog coming. Hold on. Okay. All right, y'all. Hey, everybody. Okay. So we'll give people a second because the link, all the things. And we're figuring stuff out. So we're sorry about the way that the original registration link expired because of the way we had it set up. So that's why we had to re-register. And, we're just figuring out the technology as we go. So we'll give everybody a second. And so today we're going to jump right back in where we left off. We're going to go through the next two elements so that we have a chance to kind of talk about earth and metal. I know we've kind of talked about them a little bit already, but I want to have a chance to kind of give you a little bit more information. And if we have time, we will do another demo if we can. Araya, how are you feeling? Pretty good? Before we jump in, do you have anything you want to add from your time? You don't have to. That was kind of spur of the moment, but.
Just focusing on what's possible.
Good. Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
All
Take
right.
all the help I can get, though.
I know. Don't we all need a little bit extra? I mean, that's the beautiful thing about being in these communities and getting to help each other. Because we have to do the work first, right? Like that's part of the plan. Okay. So as always, I'm going to share my screen and we're just going to go ahead and look at these elements. So that we can, all right. What are we in? We are in the preliminary. That's the wood. We've done fire. And we are starting with the guardian, which is the earth element. So we're gonna talk a little bit extra about the earth element because these next two show up quite a bit when we're working with our clients. So the earth element, so if you remember, as it moves through, the earth element comes after fire, in between fire and metal on the 5-element cycle, right? And so what I want to talk about there is that earth is one of those tricky ones in 5-element work where it lives between, in the seasons, it's kind of lives between summer and fall. So it's kind of late summer, early autumn. It's this time when we actually begin to harvest, right? So we see it in the cycle as something that lives between those two elements. But it also, earth is kind of tricky because it's also found in the transition between all of the elements. So as we move from water to wood, which would go from winter to spring, we'll see an earth time as we transition. It's the energy of transition. And so when we look at that from a different perspective, and like if we back it up into some of the ancient texts, earth was not necessarily found in this cycle as its own season. It was more the middle. It was like kind of it was the space in the middle held all the seasons, kind of the thing that held all the seasons together. And then it was also this energy of transition. So you will see earth in two different ways when you look at 5-element charts. You'll see it in the 5 elements as you go through in the circle, but you can also sometimes see it. Sometimes some charts will show it in the middle, with the alignment being more that the other 4 elements with the directions, so north, south, east, west, and then earth as the center. That actually aligns more with the I Ching, the way the I Ching moves into the 5 element work, which we will talk about, and obviously we'll talk about it in NeuroCohesion. We'll point to it a little bit when we talk about human design, but and also when we do that, when we move earth to the middle of the 5 elements, where it sits in the middle and the others sit around it, it actually begins to align a little bit more with some of the other element archetypal systems like Ayurvedic tradition and some others, right? So it's kind of a both and. We can look at it either way. But in traditional 5 element work, we will see it as its own element in the flow cycle. And so that's how we're going to look at it in this beginner, masterclass, this kind of overview. So again, earth sits after fire, before metal in the flow cycle. And it's the energy of our caretaker, our inner guardian. That's why I call it the guardian. So I like to say, if you're thinking about earth, you're thinking about earth as the garden and the gardener. Like, it's the ability to grow and nurture and devote our time and attention to growing something, to reaping the benefit of something. But it's also the attention it takes to make that happen. So it's kind of the nurturing and the nurturer. It's kind of this sense of inner well-being and wholeness. It's associated with the solar plexus, or with the throat chakra in some traditions. Again, you'll see it line up with different things, but in the way that I learned, it's associated with the throat chakra. And if we think about that connection, we're really thinking about, it's our ability to express ourselves. It's associated with the sound. You'll find it with like singing and sound, and the truest expression of ourselves, our ability to speak our truth, to communicate our truth, to receive communication from others. And it's also the energy of us being able to take care of ourselves well and to take care of others. You'll see that the big question to this archetype, or to the earth element, is, do I understand, or am I understood? And that kind of will lay in the background of when you're working with earth element, you'll kind of feel that energy of, do I understand this? It's a seeking, but it's a knowledge seeking. So it's also tied to, when we get to NeuroCohesion too, we begin to look at the mental patterns. And this one is definitely tied to overthinking, worry, doubt, rumination. So we'll see imbalances in earth tend to happen in very much in the mental field. It's the story that we're telling ourselves over and over and over. And that's what we're devoting our attention to, right? So what we're looking at here is our ability to get bigger than the thoughts we're having at the earth level. So we get back into that observer level, and we think about what we're thinking about. We kind of observe the narrative. What am I worried about? What am I chewing on? What am I ruminating about? And trying to understand. So it's also known as the caregiver, and it's associated with contribution, appreciation, and togetherness. So we really see the earth energy really about connectedness. We'll find a lot of the divine feminine attributes in earth, which are really about like tenderness and connection and compassion and kindness. The supporting role, someone who wants to help support, to nourish, to grow something. So you often find earth types in the center of communities. That can be in the family center, but it could also be the person that's kind of taking care of everyone at work or in their career. So I like to slow down on this one a lot, because as practitioners, we tend to have a lot of earth energy. We tend to want to nurture other people. We want to help other people feel better. So this is often something that we see in the career choices, like nursing and caregiving, acupuncturists, doctors. We'll see a lot of this caregiving nature in our profession. So we really want to pay attention to it because it comes with some tendencies, the tendency to over worry about people, the tendency to not always have really great boundaries. So that's what we're going to see here, right? In balance, when the earth is in balance, we're able to create harmony. It's about peacekeeping, that peace and harmony. It's compassionate, it's dependable. It's nurturing, and it's keeping those cohesive connections for myself and for others. It's actually associated with connective tissue in the body. We'll talk more about that in a second, but it's about like kind of holding it all together. And it is really a very mental energy. So it is our ability to remember, it's our cognition, it's clarity in our minds, it's remembering details, it's empathetic, it's about healthy digestion and good eating habits. We'll look at the spleen and the stomach in a minute. It's the ability to stay present with people. Like when an earth energy listens deeply, they're really present with who they're listening to, and they can create bonds very well. Well, our earth energy creates bonds. You don't have to be an earth to have these balances, right? So let me clarify that. When we're looking at the 5 elements, I think I've said this before, but I want to put it here again. We're looking at that everybody has all 5 elements, and we can look at those elements and how they relate to each other to find where people might be having balances or imbalances in their health and their emotions and in their mental field. But we also, in Chinese medicine, we can look at someone's tendency. So you can take a 5-element quiz, and there's several out there, and find out what type you are. And what that means is it's the archetype that you tend to lead with. So everyone has earth energy. Some people tend to lead with that element, just like other archetypal systems. So we're looking at both sometimes when we're doing this work. We're kind of looking to see what type are they. That's going to give us some background. And again, we'll go into that in NeuroCohesion 1 really deeply. But then also we look at like everyone has this. So when it's in balance and when it's out of balance. So for everyone, when earth is out of balance, we tend to be in a state of worry. We tend to be predicting the worst because we're worrying about something, right? And if there's not anything to worry about, we will predict something and then worry about it. It can have brain fog or lack of clarity, can lead to overwhelm. When the brain is too busy, the nervous system gets dysregulated, and we can get into a state of stress, overwhelm, particularly for the earth around food and money. So we tend to see a lot of, when I'm doing prosperity work with people or money work with people, we tend to be working in a lot of earth disruptions, but also with food. So we see a lot of overeating here or undereating, and just food struggles, so food addictions. This can be the struggle to set good boundaries. If our earth isn't strong, we can't set good boundaries. We can't contain the water. Remember that earth controls water on that control cycle. So if there's not enough earth to create the banks, then the water floods, right? And then we get the emotions that kind of take over. So boundaries are really important to earth, and it's really about learning to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. We find the energy of self-doubt here, self-worth issues live here, obviously, especially when we're talking about that money perspective. And we talked a little bit about that in Araya's example. You know, we talked about earth and water and wood in that triangle. We'll see that triangle a lot. The wood, the earth, and the water together, working together. And so digestive issues, because the meridians that are associated with the earth energy are the stomach and the spleen. And so the spleen, from its perspective, it really is about helping, it's the immune system. It's about knowing who I am and who I am not. That's what the immune system does. And it also regulates our blood sugar. So we see some blood sugar dysregulation, or blood sugar issues can also live in an earth imbalance, especially from that spleen perspective. And then the stomach energy is about our ability to digest. And so you can see what churns in the mind churns in the belly, and vice versa, right? So there's this direct connection between churning. The stomach, that's what it does, is it churns. And so the mind, that's what it does, it churns. And so that can be that's what can lead to our belly not being able to digest what we're taking in. So that stomach energy, that meridian, really helps us digest what we're taking in, either at the mental level, what we're learning or hearing or communicating, or at the emotional level. If there's a lot of emotions happening, it can be hard for the stomach to keep up. It can't digest all of that emotion. And then also at the physical level. So the first step to harmonizing earth is to notice where your client or yourself are in a worrying or overthinking pattern, where there might be a struggle with boundaries, like saying yes when we mean no. And I usually see it that way. I don't see a whole lot of people that say no when they mean yes. You know, it's usually people not quite sure of how to set the boundaries for themselves. And then also earth is again about that nurturing and nourishing. So we really see people that might be in a pattern of a lack of self-care. Self-care is not just the escapism to a spa every once in a while or a bubble bath, as it is often marketed to us. Self-care is really about our devotion to our well-being. That is, do I have a spiritual practice? Do I have a meditation practice? Do I move through the world mindfully? Do I take care of my physical body? Do I eat the foods that feel right for me? Do I look and take care of all of my sleep needs? Do I throw those things out the window the first time somebody needs me for something else, right? So that's what that self-care is really about. So when we're working with earth, we're working with some of the emotions around feeling rejected, anxiety about the futures. It's usually future casting here, worrying about something that probably hasn't happened, but it can be ruminating on something that hasn't happened. Cynicism, unreliable, empty, feeling dissatisfied, doubt. Those are some of the emotional disruptions. But when it's harmonized, we really feel this like faith in the future, because there's that relationship. Everything, when it's harmonized, there's nice flow coming all the way from water, which is I trust in something bigger than myself. I know my life plan. I'm committed to my dreams, my desires. And from that, I devote my life to those things. And so we see this faith in the future, the ability to create, to gather, to create a togetherness, a community. It's that divine feminine energy of connection. It's sympathy and empathy. It's feeling content and satisfied and assured, self-assured. And I mean that with a capital S, right? That connection to something larger than myself that allows me to feel assured. So just like with the others, you're going to have this quick protocol for an earth and balance. You've got by now you should have, if you've been in this master class, you should have your libraries. I have a couple emails from when I was out of town last weekend of people that have asked. I will resend those, but for the most part, you should have them. And so you're going to put the highs and lows from your earth energy, the highs and lows from the spinal energy, the Bach flowers, the stomach and the spleen, because that's earth, the throat chakra, and those solfeggio tones in 528. So, and common areas to notice that you need to do an earth in balance is either it shows in red or blue, but or you're hearing somebody who is really in a state of worry or is having issues with food or money, is having some self-doubt, anxiety, feeling dissatisfied, or really struggling with boundaries, right? So those are some places that you know that earth is going to be part of your balance. So that's earth. And I want to kind of take a moment here to also go through metal, because metal is the last element that we're going to look at. And as it moves through the 5 elements, it comes from earth. So earth feeds metal, and then metal feeds water. So the cycle starts over after metal as it nurtures water. We call this the archetype of the alchemist, because this is where you really go deeper into, this is the process of refinement. It's the process of taking that worry and refining it down, or taking the experience and refining it down and getting the gift or getting the gold or getting the crystal, right? So things get pressurized until the diamond is made. Earth gets pressurized until the crystal is made. So there's this sense of like the gift at the center of something. And really, that's the energy of transmutation. That's why we call it the alchemist. It's the ability to take a narrative, all of the worry and the doubt and the story that we're telling ourselves about what's going on. And when I say that, I don't mean that the experience isn't happening, but also it's not just the experience that's happening. It's the story that we have around it. And our story comes from conditioning. It comes from what we've been told by our early childhood caregivers or our teachers or our society or our cultures, right? So it's like, what are the belief systems that have been kind of passed down? Here we do look at some of that ancestral patterning, things that have just kind of lived in the DNA patterning. And it's time to kind of take that whole thing, all of those thoughts and beliefs and attitudes and ancestral patterns, and refine them down until we can transmute them out of a negative experience into a gift. You can't control whether or not bad things happen, right? Things happen. That's the world that we live in. There's no way to not have that. But the way we work with it, the way we respond to it, and what we take out of it and bring back into the world is ours. That's our responsibility. And so that's what this metal energy is really about. It has this distinct energy of being regal, of being graceful. I like to think of ballet when I think of metal energy. Yoga has a deep alchemy to it. It's like the ability to be graceful and yet bringing movement and telling a story, retelling a story, right? So there's this, it is definitely an energy of spirituality and the duality of I am this big, regal, spiritual being, my highest expression of myself, having this human experience. I have a lot of physical things that are happening deep in my body, and it's that place that lives kind of between the two of those things. It also often gets associated with kind of logic, like our ability to go into that logical brain, but it's really meant to be about the ability to get bigger than the problem, to get in our highest self, and then use our logic to serve our creativity, to serve our more right brain functions, right? So, but it does have a tendency to have so the metal energy of it tends to have some meticulous energy. It likes to have things in order. It likes to be organized. It often will lean into logic. And so it can be about this energy of clarity and details and memory. Like, if you've met metal people, they often are people that are like, they know the thing. I love my metal friends because if I'm like, I want to know what restaurant is the best place to go eat, sushi in Seattle, I can call my metal friend and she will know, like, it's this and this is why, right? There's a real memory to being able to pull that and tell you what it is. But it's also associated with timing and order, and that's why it's got that left brain math component to it. But it's not just that. And sometimes when you read about five elements on the internet, they tend to kind of show it as like the accountant, and I love that because that lives here. But so does the ballerina, or I don't know the non-gendered name of a ballerina, but y'all know what I mean. Like it's the art, grace, beauty, and logic all live here together. That both and again. So the big question that will live behind the metal energy is what am I missing? What's incomplete? So it's the ability to kind of pattern find, to see something that needs to be corrected, to know how to correct it. And so, that's why they're good at math. They can see what's not there, put it back together, right? Like they're good at puzzles usually. They tend to be our metal likes no nonsense. It likes clarity and efficiency. It's also known as the architect because from that spiritual perspective, it's that ability to create ritual, to create ceremony, and then have the attention to details necessary to create mastery, right? So, and it's the ability to stay focused with our attention to the details and master something. They love systems and protocols, right? We all love those anyway, but metal will like it more. Okay, so when our metal is in balance, it's really a focus on, so this has like in astrology, it has a lot of Libra tendencies, right? There's this balance, harmony, and beauty. So there's the beauty and arts aspect of metal that lives here. They want to create a safe environment. Our metal wants us to be principled, to be trustworthy, to be in our integrity, to be discerning. They can often be very devoted advocates for people. They can distill order from chaos. They want to improve through practice and preparation. We can focus on our effort, our ability to control our breath. So this is the lung and large intestine, which we'll talk about in a minute, and our ability to kind of focus on that, to maintain a routine and consistency so that we achieve what we're trying to achieve. It's goal oriented. And it is the energy of forgiveness and gratitude. So when it's out of balance, we can be overcritical, judgmental of ourselves and others. We can worry about our mistakes. We can kind of like, this might have some of that overachiever. Like if you got a 99 on the test, you're going to worry about the one thing you missed, not the 99% you got right. It can go into a state of victimhood because some of the emotions that live here are guilt, shame, and blame. And blame is where we're blaming an outside force. It can be a person, it can be a government, it can be a problem, it can be an experience, but whatever it is, it's outside of us. And the metal, when it's out of balance, will put the problem outside of us and stay in that. As long as it's outside of us, we can't transmute it, right? So that's why it's an out of balance issue in the metal. It can be over disciplined and like it can really get too rigid, not enough fun. It needs a lot of fire energy. So if you think about it on the control cycle, fire controls metal. You need just enough fire to keep metal from getting too rigid. Too much fire will melt it down, right? But sometimes you need to use that fire to melt something all the way down and create something new out of it. And so it's really this beautiful relationship with fire energy, keeping it malleable. I used to be a metalsmith, and I really loved that place where metal was more fluid and you could work with it and create something new out of it. It can go into states of unexplained sadness. So sadness and grief live here. Remember, grief was the emotion that we've talked about, what grieves us, but also deep grief, deep sadness, deep depression. The difficulty changing plans, like if somebody has a plan, it can be very difficult to switch gears, and getting stuck in the past and that victim mentality that we talked about. So the first step is to notice where if your people are overly focused on details or getting too rigid about their way or perfectionism or needing to be right, or if they're stuck in that victim mentality. What's not on here is grief. And that's a disservice to y'all, and I'm sorry. Because grief, the true grief of like loss also lives here. And so if you have somebody who's dealing with loss, you're going to want to help keep their metal harmonized, keep their metal in balance while you also work with their grief, right? So, okay, so some of the emotions when it's out of balance would be depressed, false pride, haughty, disdain, intolerant, judgmental, grief, guilt, regret, indifference, shame. They all live here. And then we're moving towards, when it's harmonized, we want to move from those energy towards feeling more cheerful, feeling more modest, feeling fulfilled, feeling self-worth, enthusiasm, mercy, compassion, and power. And that power is really about feeling empowered, that inner power, not power over. Again, you have the protocol, and you want to notice when someone's in these states of anxiety around perfectionism, especially when it's rigid, or in that victim mentality, it's outside of me, I have no control. There's need to move through forgiveness. I don't believe in pushing people to forgive until they're in a compassionate place and they're ready to forgive something, if and when that happens, right? But it is the energy that we need to help forgive, to help let go. We're going to talk about that as the energy of let go. And when it's out of balance, we might see depression here. So the meridians that are associated with metal are lung and large intestine. And those are associated with the solar plexus. And so again, the reason why we wanted to kind of slow down here and take a little time in earth and metal is that we see a lot of imbalances in the throat and the solar plexus in people. And we see a lot of imbalances specifically in the solar plexus when people are really working through something. That could be because they're in that internal state of victimhood or internal shame or guilt, or they're in grief, right? Like, but really, if you think about the energy of the solar plexus from a chakra perspective, it's really our center. It's the inner of who we are, our connection to that, like I said, from the metal perspective, right? That higher self, that ability to be balanced and harmonized and live from a place that has that big spirituality and lovingly embraces their humanity, that we are both this big spiritual being, but we are also a messy human. And metal really helps us to, our solar plexus really helps us to live that truth, that I've got this backbone that says I'm rooted in my creator energy. I'm rooted in that higher self. And from that place, I can really express myself fully, right? So you might see this, you might see metal imbalances quite a bit, especially if people are having a hard time with feeling like they're a victim to a situation, which is often, if you think about how often we see someone who feels the injustice of being sick in some way, or the injustice of being of a situation, or the feeling really like it's outside of their control. And that makes them feel hopeless and helpless, right? And you can see where that would affect the lung energy, which is here to help us be inspired, to take in the new energy, to get, our breath helps us get bigger than the problem. And then the large intestine, which helps us to release and let things go. So when we're holding on to something and we can't let go, especially if we feel like it's an injustice to us, then the metal energy will often get out of balance. And so our goal is to help people to understand that you can't change an external experience. You can't change someone else's opinion. You can't change what's happening out there. You can only change how you're responding to it. You can only take back the power that you have within it. Often you can't change the experience, but you can change how you're going to respond to it. And that's what you're really helping them with metal. So I threw this in here so that you could kind of, this is like a quick cheat sheet that kind of, we will dive into this much deeper in NeuroCohesion 1, but I wanted you to kind of see it on all 5 bodies of consciousness. So the fire energy is that energy of Shen. The supramental energy, that question is, am I loved? Do I bring joy? It's the ability to connect, play, bring warmth, and inspire others. It's stress and panic. It's joy and anxiety. And on the physical level, it's the heart, the blood pressure, sleep, and stress. And so we don't have to necessarily look at all 5 elements right now, but it's a really great sheet to have printed out and in front of you, because it will quickly show you like, oh, headaches, hypertension, and like cycle dysregulation. That's a wood imbalance. Or somebody's really feeling anger. That's a wood imbalance. It's a good quick cheat sheet to have around you, so that you can kind of remember where the 5 elements are and what might be happening, especially if you're using the Genius, which you guys all are. You can see if you run the Genius and your fire is way out of balance, you can come to this sheet really quickly and see what you might need to be working with, right? So, and then also it's showing you the cycles. So that's your flow cycle, and this is your control cycle. As we move through NeuroCohesion 1 and 2, we will really dive into how to work with those things together. This first masterclass is just an introduction to the 5 elements, but even just an introduction can be really powerful in your practice, because the goal here is for you to be able to start to integrate what you know with what might be happening in the 5 elements. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is like, if you know you have somebody who's coming in and they have, blood pressure things going on, that's what they've come to you for, then it's beginning to say, well, I know I'm going to work with fire. And I know that fire controls metal, and I know that it's fed by wood, and it's controlled by water. And like it's the beginning to start to think about, right? Like what else could be happening? If my fire is really hot, then it might be baking my earth. It might be smelting my metal. There might not be enough water to control it. And it might be taking too much energy from my wood. So if you think about a fire that gets really hot, it burns the wood faster, right? So then the wood might not be resourced enough to feed fire as much as it needs. And so that's what the whole point of this work is, to start to think about, like, what's going on? My fire is out of balance, but also how that might show up in the other elements, and where do I need to actually focus my energy? Often as practitioners, we're kind of working at the symptom level with what they've told us is happening. But I'm going to use fire again as an example. If your fire is really too hot, and that's what you're trying to work on, just their fire being too hot, that will be helpful. But if you're not also nurturing their water and helping them get enough water, then they're going to come back to you with the same problem. Because the problem isn't that they have too much fire. That is where their symptoms live. But the problem might be more that the water can't put the fire out. There's not enough water to put the fire out. So you want to help with the fire. That's that restorative place. But you also really want to nurture that water and help support and lift up and replenish water energy so the water can naturally put the fire out. And that's what neurocohesion is really about. When we start to dive into it very deeply, that alchemical work then in this situation is getting down into that water energy and what's creating a water imbalance, right? Now, again, it could be that there's not enough energy in metal feeding it, which is a stress triangle, which we would talk about. Like, it could be that there's just a deep state of fear, like a chronic state of fear that's running in the background and keeping the body in a fight or flight state. The reason why I'm using this example is because we see it a lot. People that get frozen in fight or flight. And so that's going to create too much fire, too much stress in the body. We're going to often see it as sleep disruptions, heart disruptions, blood pressure issues, stress, anxiety, panic, ADD, because it creates a lack of being able to stay focused. It creates a sense of overwhelm, right? And so we can work on those things. We want to help harmonize that fire, but we also want to help harmonize that fear. We want to go deeper. We want to find out what that fear is that's keeping the body in that state of stress, and help to teach the nervous system that it no longer needs to be afraid. It no longer needs to stay in that state. We're trying to reset that nervous system out of that sympathetic response into rest and digest, into that place where we can, the parasympathetic nervous system response, right? So you're going to see this one a lot, right? You're going to see this relationship between water and fire a lot. And you would see where they're often when the fire is too hot, there is usually not enough wood. It just burns the wood too quickly. And we start to see other disruptions, right? We will definitely see not enough metal because it smelts your metal. If there's not enough metal, then metal cannot nurture water. And so water gets under. So you have this big raging fire and not enough metal and not enough water. Wood and earth might kind of go through different fluctuations of what's happening. But so the goal then is to start to look at it and say, okay, so I definitely need to harmonize fire. There's too much energy there, while simultaneously looking at what's going on in my core beliefs and my fear that might be creating this stress triangle. I know that was kind of heady, so I'm just going to stop there and just check to see if there's questions about that here. You guys might not have questions, and I will also make sure that I get a chance to ask in the chat on the Mighty Network. But if there are questions here, I want to take a break and make sure I hear them. Y'all following along? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so then I'm going to go back into my share. Yeah. So the next week, we're going to talk about, how human design begins to fit into this. And I want to just say here that we're not going deep into human design. We're not going to unpack a ton of human design, but I have found that there's a deep correlation between keeping people's 5 elements in harmony and helping them live a life that is aligned with their type in human design. That one of the ways that for me, when I've been working with clients, the more I was helping someone live in alignment with their type in human design, the less work I was having to do on their 5 element work. And so it's like the archetype behind the archetypes. And that's why I wanted to bring it here, because I think it'll be really helpful. But we'll get into some of that next week, right? We're going to kind of talk about that and how that relates next week. Next week will be our final meeting of our masterclass of this class. And then we'll talk about going forward, what NeuroCohesion looks like and how you get in and all those kinds of things. So we have about 15 minutes. And if we want to, we can do a demo if somebody wants me to do a demo. And Araya, I know you'll say yes if you want to be another, yeah. So let's do it so that we can kind of just get another sense. I also want to say to that, in NeuroCohesion 1, we really will focus very deeply, even more than we have in the past. So for those of you that have had it before, we're really going to focus mostly on how to put it into practice. Lots and lots of demoing, lots and lots of practice so that it gets embodied, right? Like, so it's like, right now it's all heady, right? I've taught you this thing that's kind of 5 elements and how do I put it into practice? And I'm trying to show you a little bit, but we definitely in NeuroCohesion 1 going forward are going to do a lot of practical work where we really get in there and we practice how to put it together. We practice how to pull in other information so that we know how to build really powerful trays. And what that leads to, y'all, when you have a really powerful tray, when you're doing really powerful work that's both restorative and alchemical, it means, one, it relates to client results, right? Like getting more of what people are trying to get to in a more efficient way. And it also creates a space for longevity in your practice, right? So it's like people coming back, people referring. It's not just about the one person you're looking at, it's about building a sustainable business. And that's the long-term projection of where NeuroCohesion is really taking you. But the more you can really do this deeper alchemical work, the more efficient and profound the work can be. And it can also be more sustainable because as you've seen, if like I was talking about with that fire, if the fire consistently is out of balance, but you're not working with the water or possibly with the metal or the wood, depending on what they need, then you're going to keep seeing repetition and why they're coming back to you. And that's a good place to be like, oh, it's the same thing. You know, this person really sits in the pocket of stress and overwhelm. And if I just keep working on their fire, then I'm always just kind of restoring their ability to deal with it, but we're not really getting to that deeper level. So, okay. All right, Array, let me get it all set up for you real quick. And I'm gonna once we get that going, I'll share my screen. Okay. Let's go. Move that here. And I'm going to share my screen. And it's going to look like this. I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to move Just to the middle. All right, my dear, you can take your mute off and you can give me your AEIOUs on the count of 3. Are you ready? Oh, go.
A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U, Araya. A-E-I-O-U.
We've got it. Okay. Yes. So, Araya, we're going to do the same thing we did last time. So we're going to run the aura picture. And then we're only going to, we'll only harmonize it for a few minutes here, run the aura picture again, but then I'm going to run it afterwards just so we get the full session from it anyway, right? So I'm going to skip our picture for now, just for time's sake, so that we can get in there and see what's going on. And then as it's loading, do you want to give me a little bit of info about how you're feeling, how you're arriving today and what you want to work on?
Still overwhelmed. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to focus on the energy of overwhelm for today and just see what shows up when we go through that kind of lens. Get all my papers together. Okay, so as you guys have seen me do before, I'm going to go straight down and I'm going to do the aura first so that we have it. And I've said this before, but I'm not real great at interpreting auras. Some other people are amazing at it, and I will always lean into them for more information because I am not amazing at it. But I like to see it. I like to see, either way, I like to see what happens. So, so this is where we're starting. We can just off, if you know nothing, then you just can see that it's kind of fuzzy around the edges. We've got that gray, kind of muddy energy in that larger sphere. And so there's green energy there that could tell us that we're going into the heart. Maybe not, I don't know. But I like to see where we're starting. And then definitely, I know Denise does some really great work with auras and reading them. And so make sure you find the resources you need to read that aura correctly. All right, so now I'm going to take a quick look at the meridians. I do want a piece of paper so that I can make some notes. Hold on. So we'll make some quick notes. So we've got some lung energy that looks like it might be over energy. And then we've got some liver that's under energy, some heart that's under energy. The governing's under energy, the pericardium's under energy, the stomach is under energy, and the large intestine is under energy. So the lung intestine, so again, this might not match exactly what the elements are about to tell us, but we can kind of begin to get a sense, right? There's something going on in metal. The lung energy is over energy. That probably means that there's something that's like that Araya is holding on to, something that's like hard for her to process and breathe through, right? And we can see that that the stomach is also under energy. Remember that stomach is that energy that allows us to process and digest the emotions, the physical, and the mental level of things. The large intestine is a little under energy, so letting it go seems really hard. So something could be really grieving, and it's really hard to let go of. Now, grieving doesn't have to be loss. It can also be something that's really bothering us, a story or an environment or an experience that's really affecting us. Again, that metal energy can have a component of ancestral patterning. It's not just Araya's thoughts. It's what's happening in that deep core belief level, deep inside the body. I often say this is the body's story that we find when we're looking at metal there. The heart, the pericardium are both fire energies. So there could be some some disruptions to fire, we'll go look. The liver is a wood energy, right? So there's some challenges with like really living alignment with purpose, or not enough energy to do that, right? So we'll look a little more deeply in just a minute. But well, let's just go look to see. I'm going to add those to the tray because I always like to add all the meridians to the tray. And let's go see what element is out of balance. Okay, so what we see here is an under energy in metal. And then we have a little over energy in water. I always write it all down so I can kind of see it in front of me. A little over energy in fire. So Araya named that there's some overwhelm that's going on. And we just saw, or we just talked about how that fire energy, overwhelm definitely can be in fire being too much, right? So we know that. And in this case, we also have too much water. Now, again, y'all know that when you rerun a genius, it could shift really quickly. Like what's going on, you know, energy is slippery, it moves around. But there's a good chance that there's quite a bit going on in water. That overwhelm is coming from a deeper state of fear or stress or anxiety that's living down in that water level, right? So in this case, what shows up in that water panel is a phobia. So there could, when we look at phobias, it could be a fear that Araya has no idea she's actually afraid of. Phobias happen on such a deep unconscious level. It's the fear of being rejected, and often, or something like that, right? It's these deep human-based fears. They're usually at the collective level and they are deeply ingrained in our cellular system, right? So there could be a phobia running in the background. It's got some bladder energy around adequacy or inadequacy or feeling assured. That pyrogenium is a homeopathic that helps balance water energy. The energy of the emotion of careless, that could be like feeling careless, like a disconnection from being able to care, or feeling like people are being careless with her. We don't know. And what I want to, what I'm saying about that here is that I don't ever want you guys to put the parameters on what it means to somebody. You're just going to state that it's there. They need to figure out for themselves why that emotion is activated for them. You don't want to explain it to them and tell them that they feel careless or that they are careless, right? That would be that's not even what it means. It just means the energy. It's an emotion. So it's energy and movement, and the energy of careless is moving through Araya's field. You don't want to interpret that for her. Resolute is an energy that's moving in the field. It's the energy of winter. So when we look at the archetype of winter, we're looking at the ability to go inward and to rest and restore. So something about that doesn't feel in harmony. The ability for Araya to go to that deep well of nourishment and hibernate in that, so that they can reconnect to source. Something's out of balance there because the winter archetype is showing. Winter is a season of stillness and rejuvenation, and something about that isn't happening for Araya. Now, kidney 25 is an acupressure point combined with a marvelous vessel point, which is an extraordinary meridian, gives us it's like the spirit storehouse. It's that place where we can go deep within and resource. And I say that with capital S's, that place where we can get to that place where we can reconnect to our truth and feel restored. So it's called spirit storehouse. We also have the energy of confidence, fear, paranoia. There's a couple other acupressure points: dread, reckless, futile, terror. Sexual security and insecurity can be physical, but it's also creative energy. So that's why it's there. You want to look at it. You don't want to tell someone, again, that they have a sexual problem, that they are sexually secure or insecure. That's not what it means. Sexual energy is also the energy of our creativity. And so just knowing that there's a disruption in her feeling completely secure in her creative energy in some kind of way. There's an inner direction. Something is challenging about that inner direction. It can be the energy of hearing. So what she is hearing, that can be her internal dialogue, or it could be what she's been told externally. It can also be an actual hearing disruption. So when hearing shows, you might, if you know things about helping to look inside the auditory system, you might want to go there. There might be things like tinnitus or other disruptions to hearing that might show up there. Decisive or indecisive, and the energy of north. And the reason why it's the energy of north, it's like north is what we orient to. It's like that, it's knowing my North Star energy, right? So when north is disrupted, then I feel directionless. I feel like I don't have a guide to my life in some kind of way. I keep trying to scroll on my screen. And then if we look down at what's in blue, then we see that there's selenium, which is a mineral, a salt, and then again, some of that, that sexual energy is that creative energy. In this case, we'll dive into that more in NeuroCohesion 1, but that's essential chi that she needs to actually live out her life, right? So, okay, so we can see kind of what's there in the red and the blue. And then if we follow the protocol, we're going to go back and we're going to get our solfeggio tones. Well, it looks like we'd like to have those today. We're going to get the solar plexus. Wait, were we working with water? So we're going to get the sacral chakra, which is in red at the top. We are also going to get the spinal energy. And then the top 3 Bach flower essences. And if you have the guide to that, you can look those up and get some deeper information, right? And so that's what we're going to run, right? And then while that's running, I'm just going to check in. Araya, does some of that emotion, does that ring true for you?
Spot on.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm a mess.
We're all a mess. We're all a mess in our own. Yeah. So what we want to do is, if we had more time, definitely we would sit, and this is what we learn to do in NeuroCohesion 1. We're going to really break down our ability to communicate about these things. So we would talk about some of these emotions. We would talk about their relationship to the other elements, what might be going on. As we saw in her libraries, it's not just water that's a problem. She said she's feeling overwhelmed. That's too much fire. And we looked at that lung. The lung is chronic. Well, when we see the blue, it's really under energy. There's too much fire. It's not, it's smelting her metal, right? It's too much fire on her metal. And so her metal goes under energy. And so when we look at the energy, well, that's when we look at that deeper level of metal, if we were to have time to look deeper, we would look to see there's probably some deep, she could feel isolated. She could feel disconnected. When we see a lack of metal, it's usually a lack of vitality, a lack of being able to stay present, a lack of clarity, a lack of feeling deeply connected and resourced. And so we would also want to support that kind of that limp energy of her metal, right? Like it's not, she might have places where she's going rigid trying to control it, but she doesn't actually have enough juice to do that. So it's not sustainable. And so there's probably overwhelm with anxiety and depression. They're probably all happening at the same time. Would you say that's true, Araya?
Spot on.
Yeah. So we'd want to support those both, right? She's got that anxiety from fear happening in fire, and it's smelting her metal. It's leaving her feeling very meh about it. Like there's not much I can do. It's outside of me. I feel depressed and disconnected and not very vital, right? So as we run this, I'm going to go ahead and add the metal in just because I want to harmonize them together. You don't have to do that, but I think in this case for Araya, it would be really helpful to help like boost up that metal while we also calm down that water. So, okay. So what we're going to do, obviously we're going to run out of time. That's what we're going to do first, but I'm going to run it on, I want y'all to know I'm going to run it on Araya for about 30 minutes. That's how long I like to usually do it. And then I will check and see what it looks like. Araya, I'll send you your Aura background or what it looks like when it changes so that you have it. But that's what you're going to do, right? Like you've loaded it, you've kind of talked about it, and then you're going to run it just like you would any other protocol. So I'm going to stop my share there because I know we're over and I'm trying to be really mindful of the time. And I just want to check in. Araya, how does that, I mean, you're saying that's spot on. So is there anything else that you feel like that's going to be really like, oh, okay, that connection helps me?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Do any of you that are here have any questions about all of that before we wind it up, before we get cut off on our time? I don't see any in the chat either. Okay, so what I just want to say to that, y'all, is like, I know that sometimes when I bring information, it can feel like a lot when we get in, it feels like a lot coming at you really fast. But I just want to remind you that this is really, you have the resources, you have the handout, you have the chart, you have the Genius, you have the libraries. This is really about starting to look at it and hear what your client is saying and just look to see what's going on in the 5 elements. Whether or not you work with it, you're beginning to kind of put it together. 5 elements creates a very strong and stable system for you to work from when you're trying to help your clients on all levels. And it takes a while, right? So it's starting to just kind of keep that one chart, even if nothing else, just keep that next to you when you run the Genius and just take a glance. If for whatever's showing, look to see, is there a correlation between what the 5 elements are saying and what's showing on their main screen or what they're complaining about, right? It's like, what I really want to give you is a place to play with it for right now, right? Okay, so next week, again, we'll start to look at types and how that type plays into it. And then that will be the end of our masterclass. And so thank you guys for coming in person. I love to see you. Thank you guys that watch the replays. That makes me feel amazing because I would love for y'all to be using this information. And I will see you next week. Bye for now.